So you
Yeah.
mentioned him obviously there. Lord Alfred Hayes occupies such a special place in the fans of us, us Brits especially. He's
Yeah.
right there, so seminal to all of those releases that I loved as a young man. Tell me about what it was like to work with Lord Alfred.
Well, his lordship, and I've mentioned many times, there's two people really at the WWE that took care of me. Really, I mean, most the whole team did. But if it wasn't for his lordship, who also lived in Stamford at the time, where we were, the headquarters were, and our television studios were there, and he lived in the city, and also Gorilla Monsoon. And Gorilla was up at the television studio pretty much every week or so. And I became very close with him. And, Gorilla is one of those guys, either he liked you and if he didn't, man, you forget it. That you were getting nothing from him. But for some reason, I think he liked the fact that I was very respectful of the business. I was eager to learn, and I knew my place, and I worked my ass off. And I think that he really appreciated that. And Alfred just became a really good friend, and they would counsel me on how the business worked. As I've said, I didn't know a lot about the origins of it, and there's a lot to it, and you don't get in easy. And it took a good year before I was accepted. And in the meantime, I just had to take it. I just had to keep rolling. I had to keep have thick skin and just keep showing up. And eventually, they stopped speaking Carney when they came into a room when I was there. And so I was always eternally grateful for his lordship. But besides that, he was just an awesome person, an unbelievable sense of humor. I never heard an expletive come out of his mouth the whole time he was in my life, and that was just because he was a gentleman. The worst you'd get out of him was "drat" or "how unfortunate," and we palled around. That Stamford wasn't a big city, and we'd go down to South Norwalk and have a few pints, and he was just wonderful to work with. And if you look at, he was wonderful to, as far as he could just ad lib with you, he could just improv with you and roll with it because he'd had all that experience. And people don't really, I don't think, they know him as this English announcer. As far as here in the United States, of course, they know him better in the UK. But he was a very accomplished wrestler,
Yes.
and he was a tremendous heel. And he loved being a heel. He loved being that arrogant Englishman. And he used to cut promos. I've gotten a chance to see some of the stuff where he had the tea, the little teacup with
Yep.
the saucer there, and he'd be steering this and just destroy whoever the opponent was and what he was going to do to them in the ring. You sniveling, rat, and I'm going to, and he loved being a heel. And unfortunately, most of his career with the WWE was as a babyface. But if you'll listen, a lot of the times when we did play-by-play, he got a chance to give it to me. He turned heel a little bit when he would do the announcement because his feeling was you can't have two guys agreeing to everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what you got to have the balance in the team. You can't have two baby faces doing a match. It just doesn't work necessarily. And so I think a lot of the folks in the UK who got the opportunity to listen to those matches, they got to see the master at his work. They got to see his lordship where he was happiest. And that was when he got to put the boots to somebody. And just an awesome person. I loved Alfred. He was one of my greatest friends. And I remember a quick story when, as I told you, we lived in Stamford together, and Alfred was, this older, refined gentleman, and it was a very affluent area, of course. So a lot of people had nannies that were brought over from the UK, and Alfred had befriended a few of them because he was from the UK and knew the ways of what was going on in the United States, and so he made friends. So whenever they would come over there, these women would contact him, and he was, uh, help them out. I won't go into any romantics or anything. If he got involved in that, that's privy. But he had this gigantic Lincoln Continental that Vince had owned when they first moved to Stamford, and then of course as business got better, Vince had a few other cars, the limos and the Clonets, but this car was sitting there, and Alfred asked him, "Are you going to use that thing?" And Vince said, "No, you can have it." So he drove this gigantic blue Continental around that had the doors that opened out, right? And we would have a lot of social gatherings back then. And Alfred would show up with this blue Continental and 8 or 9 nannies in it. And I used to call him the flock of nannies that would be with him. And it was just his thing. He was working it. Yeah. But they would go everywhere they wanted, everywhere he wanted to go, whatever. And they adored him. They adored Alfred because he was just a gentleman. And if they needed anything, he took care of them. He knew the city. And he was a great friend to them, too. And he would just show up to these parties and everybody would just be blown away because he had these beautiful young English women that just fawned all over him. And I that's one of my greatest memories of seeing Alfred show up at a party. And he would have maybe a white dinner jacket on that he was wearing. And hello, Sean. I have a few wenches I'd like you to meet. Of course, he was kidding, but just wonderful. And I miss him to this day. He was one of the greatest people I've ever known in all walks of life and the people I've met. I miss Alfred dearly.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how much your face is lit up talking about it.
Yeah. Oh God, I just remember that he would always have some line when he'd walk in, and I remember one night we came home. There was an apartment building there that he liked because it was like an old watchtower. I think it reminded him of England. And he had this big studio on, what do they call it when it's like at the top of the floors? And it was just this gigantic open place. And he didn't want to live in a house or anything. He loved that. I think because it reminded him of London. And this was back in the day when you might have a few cocktails and you might get behind the wheel of a car. And I remember after a particular evening, we'd gone out and he had insisted he was fine, that he was going to make it home. And we did a lot of stupid things back then, of course. But I remember that I went over to the Watchtower that morning to get him for something. And I remember that he had parked his car somehow where 3 wheels were in the street, but one was on the curb. I just, it's like it was, and I went up to his apartment and I said, I opened up the window and I said, "Alfred, did you see how you parked last night?" And he came over to the window and he said, "Dear Lord, Sean, sometime during the evening, someone moved the sidewalk." So,
it's nice to hear that he was the same off.
I think, and that was Alfred. God, he was just wonderful.